Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag and drop fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way. I'm Pete Wright.
And I'm Andy Nelson.
Welcome to the Next Reel. When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
Fast Company is over.
You need a quadrivane blower installed.
All right, teens, queens, guys in blue jeans, this is it. The world of the drag racer, fast cars and Fast Company.
Why didn't you call me a Hatsu?
You're finished.
Now we're gonna run that car, and you ain't gonna stop us.
Burning out, Fast Company.
Don't go away, fans, because there's lots more coming right at you.
Criminal to keep a lover like you on the road for so long.
All right. Well, I've said everything I need to say, Andy.
Thanks for joining us, everybody.
Yeah, that was it. This was a surprise Cronenberg film. Was it a surprise to you?
Well, no. And I guess, it would have been if I hadn't already learned about how this one was so different. So I guess to that end, it was spoiled. So I went in going, this is going to be the one that feels really different.
Yeah. It felt different. I feel like emotionally I'd worked myself up to being ready for some Cronenberg horror and to go through the body horror journey and all of that. And then he gives us Fast Company, which is a movie about the drag racing sort of, I would guess, sort of pro-am drag racing funny car circuit. And it is not, it's out of character. And Cronenberg has some interesting things to say about this movie and how it fits into overall his overall catalog and contribution, which I look forward to talking about. To me, this movie probably was made worse because we're talking about it in this series. And I struggled with it because I kept expecting around every corner to have the underarm rectal proboscis. And like I just expected to be shocked around every corner. That didn't last that long, but it was a surprise that this film was as slow moving as it was. And I think it's an interesting love story that he gets to tell to this thing that obviously he cares very much about. It's tough to make an exciting movie about this.
Well, I don't know if I'd agree with you there. I mean, I thought it was fine. I actually enjoyed it for what it was. It's a genre film. It's a car racing movie. It fits. It fits in kind of that B genre that you would expect this type of film to exist in. Does it feel like a Cronenberg film? No. Like if I went and watched this straight up before I really knew, or if you took all the credits off, if you stripped everything off, like I feel like some of Cronenberg's other films, you can really tell, okay, this is the guy who's going to be doing that again. This film, like, I went into this watching, is there anything in this that actually feels like Cronenberg other than his clear passion for car racing and that world that he himself has kind of lived in before he kind of went into making films? Is there something that has an element of Cronenberg, even if it's just the way that he kind of was putting his shots together? And I don't think I actually felt much of anything Cronenberg in this. And I guess that's the first question that I would put to you is, when a filmmaker who has such a particular body of work makes a film like this, and I should preface this by saying David Cronenberg has said it's not so much an anomaly in his oeuvre of work, but it's one of his many children. Just like children can be different, this one is still his and represents facets of him. Does it say something to you about a director's body of work when something like this stands out as so completely different from everything else? It's not like a filmmaker who's directing all sorts of different genres. This is like a filmmaker who has a very specific genre and style, and then there's this one.
Right. And I think that's, I don't think we would ever be in a position to say, to make any sort of statements on his sort of, that don't say anything to counter his own statements on this. It's fine for him to see this as his children. But I think that the things that are interesting to me to answer that question are the stylistic bits, the way he compresses time through editing, the way he handles action sequences that happen very, very quickly, that I think you can get away with a lot more in a horror picture than you can in a film like this. Because in a horror film, we have a skewed sense of time anyway, right? We have an internalized understanding that when the victim is running through a field and someone is chasing the victim and they're only walking, it's okay that they're going to catch up because time works differently in a horror movie. It's okay. Like, we can let a lot go. I had some enormous trouble in this movie, the way action sequences were handled, the way explosions were handled, the final sort of climactic race were very Cronenbergian cuts. Like, it felt like he was moving through time in a way that in this movie, where in this world where I have a much better sense of how time works, it doesn't work. It violates rules that I've already internalized and can't let go of. And so it makes the ending wholly unbelievable to me and sucks a lot of the energy out of it. So that's one area where I think this does feel like Cronenberg. And as a result of what I know of Cronenberg, it doesn't work as effectively.
That's interesting. I guess for me, I didn't have any particular sense of kind of that storytelling style that he used in the climax there that made it not work because it was in a different genre. Because again, I think I connected this more to kind of just a genre picture of car racing movies, whereas I think you kind of placed it more in like kind of a real world setting, which I mean to a certain extent it is, but I just kind of gravitated more to just kind of that gritty B genre car movie. And so I didn't have any issues with that sort of thing. And to that end, I think maybe I found that it worked better largely just because I think he went from one genre to another genre and was okay changing conventions. And he acknowledged, like right out of the gate with this film, I'm doing this in a totally different genre. Look, listen, I've got a pop song playing and we're just cutting to beauty shots of cars and trucks driving and all this sort of stuff. It felt so much like him saying, this is a different genre that I haven't worked in before, but it's a fun genre and I'm just going to throw everything at it the way that I've seen it done in this genre, and I'm not worrying about it so much. And I felt like I felt like him relaxed a little more in a way where he was just saying, yeah, I'm going to play in a different sandbox with these different toys, but I still know how to kind of roughly tell a story and get that through. And so he did. But I guess to me, it didn't feel anything like I just didn't spot anything that just said this is definitely Cronenberg, other than the way that he, I think, really loves to show the details of kind of the I guess I would say the technology. In the other films, it's the technology as horror and kind of how things are happening. In this particular case, it's technology in the form of these cars. Like he gets some really incredible shots of, he gets shots of engines and things working and stuff like that, but he gets like these great camera mount shots of these cars at a point in time where I don't think a lot of that was being done. And to me, that kind of work did feel very Cronenberg.
Well, and I agree with you there. And I would even say to the point of, the engines and stuff, the way he shoots engines, the way he shoots us taking parts off and putting parts back in and the way we live in this world of the sort of pro-am part, right, of racing, where we see the contrast between the giant tractor trailer that is sponsored by Fast Company, the oil company, and, the second, third, fourth tier to the all straight amateur drag racing, that we get to see, whatever you brought to the track, you can race it, come sign up, right? That kind of feel. I thought that was exhilarating. There is a sequence at the end where we get all the drag racers. It's this montage of happy drag racing, that just goes on and on and on. But as the sun goes down, it really changes the way the, flames coming out of the tailpipes. I mean, it's just, there's some really interesting stuff there. And that I agree with you, is effectively Cronenberg to me. The challenge I have about this as a racing movie is that, to me, much of the exhilaration of the best racing movies that I really love are about a kind of racing that gives you more racing in the racing, right? In this movie, the racing is over in 6 seconds, right? To the point where they actually have to superimpose a timer in one of the interior car shots, which I actually really liked. I think that was effective in terms of giving us a sense of place and time, where from the green light, we had the clock start kind of overlaid on top of the interior kind of driver's POV, and it's over in 6 seconds. And it is an incredibly fast and sort of exhilarating way to say, hey, you're in a dragster right now, and it's going to be great. But I think mechanically, because these races are so short, I never got a sense of the emotional drama of the race, right? I never got a sense of the narrative arc of a race itself, of two, like the mano a mano on the track, really going at it, turn 1, turn 2, turn 500. I never got any of that out of this movie. And so in that regard, I think it's the wrong kind of racing to have to film and to treat cinematically. For me, I didn't connect with it.
So you're not a fan of bull riding movies either, then?
I'm largely not a fan
there's a whole movie called 6 Seconds. That's all.
Yeah,
about
no, I know.
Bull ride.
That's right. That's right.
I can definitely see your point. I don't think I end up agreeing with you just because, and I agree. Like the longer car races, like the actual sports cars, like when you have those races that last lap after lap after lap after lap after lap.
Say what you will about Days of Thunder, like that is those are race. That's a race car movie.
There's definitely something about that. Now, these are totally different kinds of cars. You know, these dragsters and these funny cars. It's a totally different type of race. That's a little different class almost. And I personally,
I think it is literally a different class.
Oh yeah. I actually ended up kind of really liking it and kind of connecting with this world that don't think I've ever seen kind of depicted in film before. The fact that these cars are designed to race really well, but pretty much only for about like that 6-second window of time, I find really interesting. And I don't know, I connected with these characters. I mean, it's not a great story. It's pretty standard stuff. And when I say I connect with these characters, I like it. It's all in kind of that B movie, you know, it kind of passes by, and by the time it's over, you know, I don't think that I have much connection to it, really. But at the time when I'm watching it, I'm like, you know, it's interesting. I like these characters. I like this world. But it's nothing that is huge. And to that end, I think it really does end up falling to the characters and how much are we going to be able to connect with the characters in the story, because that is going to be the thing that really makes a story like this work. And like you said, you brought up Days of Thunder. I would argue that we can connect with those characters better because they're, as Hollywood as that story may be, we may be able to connect with those characters a little more than perhaps we do in this particular film.
I think that's accurate. I did some searching. I'm certainly not an exhaustive search, but I'll tell you, it's hard to find racing movies that focus on this class of racing in my limited experience here. I've got Drag Strip Girl, 1957. I've got Funny Car Summer, 1974. But mostly when you're on the track, you get a chance to go around the track, and you get a chance to build a connection with the competition. And in this movie, for me, this movie was void of that competition. I want to ask you, related to that, about our supposed antagonist here. Now, generally in these movies, the antagonist is set up as the guy that you're racing against. This movie is a little bit of a pivot on that. Gary, the guy we're racing against, is in the middle of a much more, I think, complex web of intrigue and malfeasance and sabotage than being the direct sort of mano-a-mano racing foil. And he ends up playing, I think, a really interesting role ultimately in the end. The real bad guy is Fast Company, the representative, the track representative, I would say, right?
Yeah, less the company, more specifically the representative, as depicted by John Saxon.
Who is, I think he's generally a great bad guy.
I think he's great, period. I think John Saxon has been great in such a wide variety of movies, whether he is a more villainous character or he's kind of a more straightforward, kind of just a character like in the Nightmare on Elm Street series. I think he's just fantastic in those ones. But I think he's definitely one of those actors who has done a pretty good variety of good and bad. And I generally enjoy him in films that I see. And here, as the bad guy, I mean, I think that you could say he's definitely drinking it up and does a great job of playing it. And you're right, he's not the other racer, but I think that that's an interesting element of the story, the way that plays out and who ends up being kind of the bad guys in the film. Because certainly John Saxon is one of the bad guys. Also, Gary Black, he's on, I guess you could say, the bad guys team. He's the main guy. But then we also have Meatball and Stoner, and who are kind of his, I don't know what you call those guys, but just kind of
like his crew.
His crew, right. And Meatball is the one who really ends up kind of becoming the minion of Adamson, John Saxon's character, and the one who kind of ends up kind of performing some more of the nefarious deeds in the film.
Right. As Saxon's character starts to sort of turn the table on our protagonist racing team, Lucky Man, we get it's kind of an interesting twist that we realize that the team is out to, put this legendary racer out to pasture and replace him with somebody who's much more of a company man. And, can we find that in Gary? And Saxon doesn't go directly really to Gary. Gary is, what he starts out as kind of a sympathetic competitor, and he becomes a foil. He's given ultimately the big truck. He's given the, all the trappings of success, while Saxon and the, Meatloaf are out there trying to turn the tables on these two teams.
Meatball.
And Meatloaf.
Meatloaf is different person altogether.
All of the meats, man. Would you tell me, just stop for a minute, would you have been surprised one bit if Meatloaf had shown up in this movie? I beg to say you would not have been surprised.
No, I would love to see Meatloaf playing Meatball. That actually, that would have been great.
So I don't even remember what I was talking about.
Yeah. Well, no, it's an interesting world that is set up here. The fact that Gary is kind of that guy, and there are elements that I really do enjoy about this, and I haven't been able to kind of put my finger on this if it feels really Cronenbergian, because I know that he was one of a few writers on this particular project, which is the first time that he's kind of been in that situation where he's kind of helping write a script that other people have come up with. In this particular case, it's still kind of this corporate entity that ends up being the antagonist of the story. And to that end, is that kind of a Cronenbergian element where it's kind of this bigger entity that is kind of bad. I don't know if I could say that it is completely Cronenbergian, but I feel like it's something that he's played with a little bit.
Well, couldn't you make the same case that the big company is represented by the Starliner, and what they've come up with as this kind of megalopolis of self-contained living in Shivers? Couldn't you say the same thing about the self-contained giant sort of company-backed hospital conglomerate in the last movie? I mean, I think you could make that case that...
that's what I was thinking that we could, but I don't feel like the doctor who's coming up with the plan in Shivers is any way related to the actual company that is behind Starliner in Shivers. Likewise, I don't think it's really this huge, medical megalopolis that is running the Colloidal Institute, whatever it is, in the second one,
Rabbit.
Yeah. So I
don't think we can be too liberal or too literal about that, because I do think that there's a sort of culture that he's commenting on here. Yeah. And in this movie, kind of big company, big oil is the Starliner of this movie, right? I mean, it's the thing that is so big and so powerful that it demands you change your behavior to suit it. And in this case, it might be, as superficial as changing teams around the racetrack and changing logos on a car, or it could be the weirdly gratuitous motor oil covered naked body sex scene that where they actually are using the company's product as a literal lubricant.
Right.
And I think that's an interesting statement, right? In terms of that Cronenberg is a really uniquely positioned to make, largely because of the kinds of movies he'd made before this one.
Yeah. And to that end, I think there is an element that does speak to kind of his type of storytelling.
Yeah.
Another element that I think is interesting in kind of coming up with this story is all the writers in Cronenberg really went into this wanting to make a Western in the car world. And so kind of you've got the whole, the black hat and the white hat, like in the old Westerns. Here it's a black team and a white team. Billy the Kid is a character here. It's an interesting idea to kind of give this sense of this Westerns and kind of the clear-cut black and white nature of a story in this thing. But does it come through for you? And is that something you even thought about? I don't know if I thought about it at all until I heard Cronenberg talking about it. And in the end, does it end up mattering?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I end up looking at this and thinking, okay, what are the Westerns that he might have been watching, right? Are we talking about the No Name trilogy? Right?
No,
are we talking?
I would think that it's more just
about?
the straight up good guy, bad guy, the black hat, the white hat, just kind of the clean cut early John Wayne sorts of Westerns before he was doing things like The Searchers.
Okay. All right. I guess it did not come across that well, that clearly for me, not until after the movie and I started trying to place those labels on this movie. For me, it was a race car genre picture. And that's about as far as I got. I mean, have you been able to make more sense of it?
No, I mean, I get it. I see that they did it after I read about it. It's like, okay, sure, Billy the Kid. That's an obvious name and a nod. He's wearing a cowboy hat. You've got kind of these good guys, the bad guys, the bad sheriff and stuff like that. I see these elements there.
You're finished in this town.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to kind of use that as a model when they're putting the story forward. But largely in the end, it is just a genre picture like a Western film is. And to that end, I think it didn't bring a whole lot of new ideas to it because it really ends up just being another genre picture.
Right. I mean, it didn't scream to me Western, slap me in the face Western, like, Serenity. Right, a Western, literally a Western in space. It didn't feel like it was leaning that heavily into it. But we do get a steal the horse sequence, which is in this movie where they have a car, they just have to go find it, and they go find it, and they break the horse out of the barn sequence. And as I watched it, it was cheeky, and I was not a fan. But as we talk about it, maybe it was cheeky in all the right ways.
Yeah, for me, it works. I mean, again, it's all part of the genre picture. And that speaks to kind of, again, this nature of a genre picture where I feel like they could have put more into the writing to really kind of boost it up a little bit, because the ending really starts feeling like stuff is happening that just doesn't make sense anymore. But I'm like, but in the world of the genre that they're playing in, it fits. Okay, I'll give it to them. And so I end up kind of shrugging my shoulders and blowing it off because I'm like, okay, so they steal the car back. In reality, I completely don't buy it, because if he has gone and stolen the car, I can't imagine that he would be able to race in a stolen vehicle. I feel like that's a perfect time for Fast Company to sweep in and say, hey, this is stolen. You're not only not racing in this, but you're under arrest. I mean, there's things like that that don't make any sense.
Smokey and the Bandit.
Yeah, I'm yeah. It's just illogical at that point.
It is. It goes, and for me, I was already pretty bored, and then it became illogical, and that makes it not an enjoyable way to wrap up this movie. How did they not see Meatloaf at the far end of the track,
or Meatball, whoever it is,
or Meatball? I did it again. What are you going to do? How did they not see Meat Lover's Pizza down at the far end putting the flammable material on the track? How was he able to cut off Billy in the other car, and Billy able to stop so quickly after the car immediately in front of him explodes? Like, there's nothing logical about that sequence in time and space, and so it completely falls apart. It goes from grounded genre picture to completely unrealistic nonsense.
Yeah, and I would argue that because of the nature of the genre that it's in, it ends up being, I shrug my shoulders and go, okay, it fits with what they're doing in the genre.
But see, Andy, that's where we definitely disagree on that point, because the genre, like we're going to call it, what are we calling it, as a genre picture, right? I mean, it's not a fantasy. It's a grounded race car movie with human physics.
Yes, but it also came out in this period in the 70s and 80s that was this whole carsploitation thing of exploitation car movies that were just like these crazy car, race movies and all sorts of crazy nonsense happening. And, I think things happen in these movies that are beyond belief to a certain extent. And I feel like you're putting a lot of emphasis on the fact that just because we're in the real world of car racing, that everything that's going to happen in it all of a sudden needs to be realistic. And I feel like it came out in this period of time where you're not getting that out of other car racing movies that are coming out. Like, I think it would have been an anomaly if it did act more naturally in the period of the 70s when all these other carsploitation movies were coming out.
You're absolutely right. And I will give you all of that if you introduce some more carsploitation in acts 1 and 2 of this movie. Like, they set up a movie that was more grounded than the other crazy bonkers car movies. Like, he introduced wackadoo car stuff in the last 10 minutes of the movie. And by then, it's too late. By then, it's not, he hasn't given me the movie. Like, he's changing up the rules of the movie that he gave me. And that, I think, is the sin of this movie.
Okay. I think you're being a little hard on the genre period. But hey, it's, to each his own.
Genre of what? Wackadoo carsploitation movies?
Yeah.
This is not one of those movies.
It totally is.
This is a movie that's going to be a grounded car movie, a racing movie, and it's going to show me these relationships between men and women, and it's going to show me this big company stuff. And then in the last few minutes, it's going to show me nonsense physics. Like, fine, if you're going to give me that kind of movie, but like you got to set those rules up earlier.
I totally get where you're coming from. I can see those points. I guess I can
make the points again, Andy, if you need me to.
I am sure you can. I'm sure we could fill the rest of this show with you making the points and me not worrying about them. But that's fine. I don't have an issue because for me, I just see what's happening. And you know what? It's in like so many movies where you get to the climax and something happens that hasn't happened before because it's the climax of the movie. And of course, they're going to change things up in order to actually make a climax. So you're experiencing something different and bigger and beyond what you've seen in the rest of the film. So I end up having no problem with it because in context of just this world of these car movies, sure, another car raced ahead of the other car. I'm really not too worried about it because it's a B car racing movie.
I'm very flummoxed by this because I know you are intentionally not nitpicking at your normal standard. I feel like the way I do.
It's an exploitation movie. Like, why nitpick on a movie like this?
This is exploitation podcasting is what this is. And right here, two thumbs, looks like this guy.
I can nitpick the rest of the show away, but it's like, what's the point? This is not the type of film you nitpick. This is the type of film that they made for a certain audience. The certain audience enjoyed it, and you know what? I can enjoy it and not worry about it.
All right.
It doesn't mean that I'm going to all of a sudden call it a 5-star film. Far be it from that happening.
I fully expect it to be a 5-star film with quibbles. Of course, it's a 5-star film with quibbles. Moving on. How do we even go on from there?
That's a good question.
Can we talk? Should we even start talking a little bit about some of your favorite cast performances?
Sure, we can kind of run through a few key cast members. Who do you want to start with? Should we? I feel like we need to start with Lonnie Johnson.
That's what I was going to say. William Smith playing Lucky Man Johnson. So he's the stoic, right? He's the rock of the racing thing. He's the guy who survives all the nonsense explosions and lives to tell the tale. Got a stable relationship in Seattle. As far as we know, we don't see any other, womanizing on his part. He's a good guy, right?
Yes, which is rare for him as an actor. He largely played bad guys. That was kind of his bread and butter. He, I think, enjoyed that perhaps a little more than playing good guys. And it was a little bit of a change for him to kind of do a good guy role. And I thought he did a great job in kind of the good guy role for this film. I kind of enjoyed his, just the kind of the world of all of that. I thought he was fine. What'd you think?
I did. I know I did too. I mean, I think for what the movie was, for this grounded cinematic exploration of drag racing that obeys all the rules, I think he did great. And I was interested in the texture of his character, kind of the way he played it. I could actually feel a subdued sort of Clint Eastwood in his performance. So that I guess is an easy way for me to make that connection back to, the Leone Westerns. It just felt gritty like that.
Speaking of Eastwood, he was in Any Which Way You Can with Eastwood.
That's right. That's right.
I don't feel like I've seen much of his other films. A lot of the stuff he's in are just not the movies that I'm generally seeking out to look at. But I did see he was Conan's father in Conan the Barbarian just a few years later.
Yeah.
He was also in The Outsiders and Rumblefish and Red Dawn.
Red Dawn. Yeah.
And outside of that, I think probably 94 is the last time I watched something with him. And he was a bit part in Maverick. So I don't, I have not seen much of him. I missed Manosaurus. Sad to say.
Oh, me too.
Oh, yes.
He did. He won the 200-pound arm wrestling championship of the world multiple times, according to Wikipedia, and also won the U.S. Air Force weightlifting championship. He was a big dude. He was stacked.
You know, you can get that sense here. He's definitely big. Like I think when he's like kind of in his wife beater shirt, and he's, I think that's when he actually decks Adamson and knocks him out of his trailer.
Which is a fall. Kudos to that stunt performer, because that was a knock hitting the pavement like that.
That was a good one. Yeah.
Okay, so we've already talked a little bit about John Saxon. Do you have anything else to say about him?
No, but just I thought he was great here. Nicholas Campbell is, I guess, the next one we should talk about, Billy the Kid. He kind of fits. I think, again, a lot of these sorts of guys are guys who fit in this world. And for me, like, he seemed like a young racer, kind of this a little cockier, just a little, more sure of himself, but didn't necessarily have the experience. I kind of like that about him.
I did too. I thought he was. I thought he was fine. He reminded me. There's so much of this, like these movies, or this movie, I should say, that took me back to other like more slapsticky comedies. In this case, he reminded me so much of Billy from Caddyshack. For some reason,
That's actually pretty interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I just felt like that was this character, ahoy polloi, as he shows up in his fancy fire suit. There was that. And then the heist sequence just reminded me so much of Stealing the Winnebago in Stripes. Like there is a vibe to these movies that we're in any other context, put the right music to it. And I could have been seeing those movies.
Felt the most to me like an element of this story that Cronenberg really pulled from his time spent with Ivan Reitman on the last two films. And stuff like that actually surprised me that Ivan Reitman was not on board this one as one of the producers, because it felt so much like something that Ivan Reitman would use in so many of the movies that he was involved in.
Yeah. Homage. We had Claudia Jennings as Sammy and Judy Foster as Candy.
I actually felt like, in context of what sort of movie this is, there's at least an interesting element to both of these two characters. And I actually felt like they had more writing than I was kind of expecting.
I think the airplane sequence in particular, when she's in the cabin with Phil, and he's literally describing to her that he's about to use her for her sexuality, and he then later prostitutes her out, and she makes I think many of the right choices. She's got some good. There's some solid writing for her in those sequences.
Yeah, and just the fact that there was an actual relationship going on with Claudia's character and with Lonnie. Like, I liked that Sammy and Lonnie kind of had this long distance relationship, and she was always looking for him to settle down. I thought that was actually,
I do too, and there is a sense of that sort of grace in complexity of human relationships, and I get that, and I think that complexity is at points here lost, because you can't on one hand have a movie that shows sort of mature and strong relationships and clear lines, business, clearly delineating business relationships, and, turn around and also say, okay, we're going to, exploit you so clearly in the movie and not have a problem with it. Like the characters clearly don't have a problem with it. And so I just felt like it's a little bit of a two-faced, as it's as we write around. We write very explicit scenes of strength, and then the scenes that the rest of the film, just in terms of those relationships, tend to be sort of flippant.
Well, and to that end, a few things. It's the 70s. Not that I'm excusing it, but, it was more obviously happening.
Yeah, we can't change history.
Yeah,
right?
That was then. Claudia was a Playboy playmate, is my understanding. And and we know that it's something that Cronenberg had used to his advantage in some of his other films, like the one we just talked about last week, The Rabbit.
That's right.
But I do think and also it's a genre picture. And I think maybe that's as unfortunate as it may be, but in context of what the genre picture was, a car racing movie is gonna kind of emphasize some of that sort of stuff, especially the scene when Billy the Kid has the two women back into the trailer. The most gratuitous nude moment that we have in anything that Cronenberg's done up to this point.
Playmate of the Month, November 1969, and Playmate of the Year for 1970, Claudia Jennings.
And this is a really kind of a sad little story because Claudia had been in a number of films, largely exploitation types of films like The Unholy Rollers, Gator Bait, Death Sport, The Single Girls. Those are the ones that IMDb says she's most known for. This was her last film because, sadly, shortly after this film was released, she actually died in a car accident. So, pretty sad way to go after being in a film about cars.
That was a real downer, and it kind of soured my mood.
I honestly, I really liked the cast. I thought that they cast it really well. I loved Don Franks as Elder, and Robert Haley as PJ, the two guys who were kind of on the crew for Lonnie. I really enjoyed George Buza and David Graham as Meatball and Stoner, the two guys who were on Gary Black's crew, and Cedric Smith as Gary Black. A little side note, George Buza, who played Meatball, he was the voice of Beast in the X-Men animated series, which I think is kind of funny. And actually, I think as an homage, they brought him in to be the trucker in X-Men. So it's kind of fun little bit of trivia. But I think that the characters were really interesting. The one that I wish that they did more with was Stoner, because I felt that there was this real interesting character arc started with Stoner, where we have that interesting moment where you can see the crews and the drivers, they're kind of they're butting heads, but they're all still kind of friendly, as you tend to be in this sort of world. And Stoner goes through the effort of changing the tire on Lonnie's truck, only to, or I think is more Billy's car actually, only to when Gary gets all pissy with Lonnie and says, take it off, they can call their guy and get it back. And I feel like, okay, Stoner is the guy he is not going to kind of go down that dark road. Meatball is. And I was a little surprised that they didn't do something with Stoner's character arc, because I felt like by the time Gary and Meatball were kind of wooed by Adamson to be kind of the new face of Fast Company, I really was expecting Stoner to kind of be that character who says, I'm not doing it, I'm going to work with the other guys. And it felt like they were setting that up, and then it never went anywhere.
Missed opportunity.
Yeah.
I don't know. I felt like the transition for Meatball was strange. I felt like it was too easy for Phil to infiltrate the blacksmith's team. It just felt too heavy-handed, too easy.
But yeah, but Meatball was always set up as kind of the bad guy. And so to that end, it's like, it feels like it's easy because it's a genre picture and they didn't put effort into the elements of the script where you could have had a more complex, well-rounded character. They wrote a straight up genre character. And so I'm like,
well,
okay.
They did. It was easy. They took the easy way out, but they also set up Gary as being a much more complex character. And
yes,
they didn't take advantage of the setup of that character, and they took the easy way out for him too. They didn't make it an interesting departure for Meatball to turn on Gary. They took Gary from being a sophisticated and interesting driver and made him a simpleton by the end. Like when he's playing darts in the truck and he says, "Wait, what are you guys doing? Don't you worry about it, Gary. Like, don't worry your pretty little head about it." I found that ridiculous. Like, why did you spend all this time making me kind of care about the relationship between Gary and Lonnie and his building the team when you're going to turn him to a simpleton by the end? Now, obviously, it's because he ends up making the ultimate sacrifice in the Fantasyland sequence at the end when he sacrifices his own life. And that, I think, is a strong moment for that character. But there's that middle area wandering narrative for me where I think they forgot who Gary was.
Yeah, to a certain extent. I agree and I disagree. I totally see that point. I think it's fair. But I like that he makes that turn. I think it ended up working for me in kind of that simpler way.
5 stars with quibbles.
I do have to point out Cedric Smith, who was Gary Black, also was in X-Men, the animated series. He played Professor Charles Xavier, along with other characters such as Red Skull and Zebediah Killgrave and Purple Man.
Oh, Purple Man. Oh, he's one of my favorites.
So there you go. There you go.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Camera, Mark Irwin behind the camera.
Cronenberg talks about how this was where really where he ended up having a budget where he could actually have crew members who had been around the block a little bit, who had some experience, and he started getting a handle on, oh, this is what they're supposed to do. Mark Irwin, the DP, this is the first of 6 films that he will end up doing with Cronenberg. Ronald Sanders, the editor, the first of 16 films that he will end up doing with Cronenberg. The art director and production designer Carol Spear, first of 14 films. Delphine White, the costume designer on this film, is the first of 4 films. Brian Day, the sound mixer, the first of 8 films. And sound effects editor Terry Burke, the first of 6 films. Cronenberg really kind of got this idea that, hey, now that I'm working with these people, I want to keep working with them. I want to collaborate with them because they are an artist. I am an artist. Let's make art together. And I think that's actually really important. Even the actors, I mean, Nicholas Campbell as Billy the Kid, he's going to be back in the very next film, The Brood, along with a couple other films, The Dead Zone and Naked Lunch. So it's really kind of this is where Cronenberg really starts finding that family that is going to kind of work with him over the course of his career.
And, I have to say, like, you can feel that in the general world building of this film. I think it feels very much in the world. I feel like I am a part of this. I feel like I'm in the truck. I feel like I'm on the racetrack. They capture what it feels like to be hot. It looks great. It's, I think apart from the craziness of the editing at the end, I felt like it was largely cut together well. I think we've already talked about some of the truly interesting and innovative camera work that they do in this film to celebrate the track and the world and the cars inside and out. So I think there is a lot to appreciate about the film ultimately, even if it ends up being, for me at least, not so much the sum of its parts.
I have to say one of my favorite shots. In fact, I would argue possibly my favorite shot of the entire film, because I feel like it captured so perfectly just the world of this, I'm going to go out and say, lower end racing. The tracks are not that great. Mm-hmm. Everything's a little run down. The shot that just made this film for me and said, this is a filmmaker who's doing a little bit more than what a B movie really needs to be. It's a shot from inside a car, and you're looking through the windshield at kind of the track and everything going on outside of it, and hanging down directly in front of the lens on the windshield. You have 3 pairs of legs. It just kind of, you can say, okay, these are people who are sitting on their car just out there watching this stuff go, and here is this cool shot inside the car, and you just see these feet. It was a perfect shot kind of depicting this world for me.
Why is it that I can't get that single shot out of my head either? Like that, when I think about this movie, that's the first shot that comes to mind. It was, I felt like I was in that car. It's exactly right.
Yeah.
It was great.
I feel like that should be the Facebook banner for this show's week.
That's right. That's right. Let's see. Did we miss anything in our notes that we were really need to talk about, or do we need to jump in quickly to the extensive sequels and remakes of this film?
Technically, this would be the final one of a number of remakes, except none of them are. I just found it really funny that when I was researching this, this is the 6th film that is called Fast Company. And I was like, that's kind of odd. And I looked at some of the synopses of the other ones, and none of them really relate. They're all kind of different. It's just titled Fast Company. The first one, 1918, then 1924, 1929, 1938. I don't know why there was such a bunch of them in those 20-year period. Then 1953 all the way up to this one in 1979. What a weird thing. I mean, I guess it's kind of one of those titles. It's like not that specific. It can kind of reference kind of anything. And here it is.
I need to get your commentary on the music and the choice of music, because there is part of me, I think, wow, he is really like he's making a statement about the world that they're in, and I think he's also, there's something that is a bit of satire in there, having a song that keeps coming back over and over again, that uses the name of the movie in the lyrics of the song, and that's a button. I found it wildly overused, and it did not spark joy. Did you find yourself touched by the way they used the song?
I didn't have any issues with it. And there were actually like 3 songs. I think it was 3 that I counted in the credits. But it's funny because it is that sort of song where I feel like, okay, I thought it was one song. I didn't realize that I had heard 3 songs over the course of the film. But sure enough, there were more than one. It fits. It's that, and I think, he starts it off, like I said earlier, with one of these songs. And that says, this is this genre. We're going to play pop songs in this movie, and it's going to feel like the sort of film you're going to get when you're going to watch a car racing movie at the theater.
I felt like this movie, that would have been a perfect opening to like a car racing version of Cabin in the Woods. Like, we're going to make this kind of movie, and in just a second, something super surprising is going to happen, and it's going to be gross, and it's going to take you in a totally new direction. And that, I think, is the challenge that I ended up with this movie. It never really took me in a new direction. So, did it do anything in awards season? Was this a big in the dragster filmmaking award circuit?
If there were more drag racing award shows for films, it might have. But unfortunately, it was just one of those movies that I don't think, we didn't really talk about it, but it struggled with its release, definitely here in the States, a little bit in Canada. But the distribution company that actually had the rights to the film actually went into bankruptcy before the film could be released. And this film was held as collateral in court. And so it was unable to actually get its U.S. release. And it did have a release in Canada, but it really kind of stunk for the filmmakers because it just wasn't able to, it didn't turn into something where they could get their money back because of the situation that it fell into. So I think because of all that and everything else, and because it's just a car racing genre picture, I don't think it was something that was going to get anything. So yeah, it's bupkis as far as awards go.
How'd it do at the box office?
Even with such a tonal shift, Cronenberg did still end up increasing his budget, working with $1 million this time, which is about $3.5 million in today's dollars. Fast Company was released March 18th, 1979, opposite California Dreaming and the China Syndrome, when it did finally have its limited release. Unfortunately, like Rabid last week, I couldn't find any information detailing how much the movie actually earned back, so that's largely what I got. But like I said, with the distribution company falling into bankruptcy, it wasn't able to get much of a distribution, and so I don't think it made much. It's one of those, I doubt there was any sign of return on the investment, but who's to know?
Well, you know what that means, Andy. It's ripe for a remake.
I think so.
Easy pickings, people. I think it's time we rank it.
Let's do it.
Head over to flickchart.com/thenextreel. You'll see all of the movies that we've talked about on this very show. If you swipe over in your show notes and you tap Flickchart, it should take you straight to this movie where you can add it to your list and see how it stacks up against ours.
First up, Fast Company, or one of our many Robin Hoods. It is Robin Hood 2010, Ridley Scott's version.
Robin Hood 2010, please.
I will say Robin Hood as well. Fast Company, or another Robin Hood movie, Robin and Marian.
Robin and Marian.
Yeah, I'll say Robin and Marian.
Okay.
Fast Company, or Bull Durham. Definitely Bull Durham.
Bull Durham.
You love it. You love it. You know you do. Fast Company, or everyone's favorite Indiana Jones adventure, Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
Would I watch Indy before I slept to this? Yeah, I probably would. I'd watch Indy.
I'm going to say
first.
Fast Company because in context of what they're doing, I think they do a better job than what they did with Indiana Jones.
Oh, man. All right, I'm going to give it to you.
All right, Fast Company takes it.
And the other movie explodes.
Fast Company, or Christmas in Connecticut.
Christmas in
a sweet
Connecticut.
little movie. I'll say Christmas in Connecticut. Fast Company, or Battle for the Planet of the Apes. This is the last of the Apes films.
I will battle. I will battle with the apes.
It's a rough one, but I would pick it first. And maybe it's just because I love the franchise more.
Yeah.
Fast Company, or everyone's complete. This is such a complete opposite to a car racing movie. Wendy and Lucy. Where's my lost dog?
I will take Fast Company, please.
I'll take Wendy and Lucy.
Really?
I'm surprised, that you will take Fast Company.
That's weird. You know, where it is on the chart right now, I'm willing to go to the mat on this.
All right, let's do it.
See what happens.
Let's just see. All right, here we go.
1, 2, 3.
Scissors.
All
Wendy
right.
and Lucy takes it.
You know, I have no feelings.
I have no feelings. I am numb to this choice. Fast Company, or everyone's favorite disease thriller, Outbreak.
Wow.
I will take Outbreak. Another genre movie that I think, it's not my favorite, but
I will too.
It's doing an entertaining job with it.
I will too. That helicopter thing, though, man. That's rough.
There are a lot of rough things in that film. All right. Well, Fast Company landed in spot 395 on our chart, 395 out of 421. That puts it at about a 6%, which is pretty low.
How did it do on yours?
A lot better, actually. Landed at 2948 out of 4213, which is actually about a 30%.
How do you think it did on mine?
I would say it's going to fare about as well as it did on our group chart.
It is. It landed at 1352 out of 1410. That puts it at about a 4%. And once again, it's one of those where, according to the algorithm, I should be giving this no stars at letterboxd.com/thenextreel. But, I feel like this movie is worse than the sum of its parts. And it's not a great film. And it was pretty boring through some of it and crazy at the end. And I still think I'll even give it a star.
Wow.
I'll give it a star.
1 star, and I'm guessing no heart.
Nah, I don't need to come back to this one.
Okay. I liked it more than you did, as was clear from our conversation. It's not a 5-star film, but it's a genre picture, and I think it's doing well for what it is. And so to that end, I'm giving it 3 stars and a heart. I'd watch it
3
again.
stars.
It's an easy film to watch and an easy film to enjoy.
There are a lot of movies that you have still to watch. So I feel like functionally, practically, you and I have just made the same choice. I think you would, but you won't ever have the opportunity.
No, but if it pops up, I'm not going to say no.
I don't believe it. I don't believe it. I think you will go eat crackers. You will just go, you'll say, hey, you know what's better than this movie? Some saltines.
Well, saltines are pretty good.
Well, so we finished this one. Where do we go from here?
We are going to be jumping to Cronenberg's very next film, which came out the same year, I think largely because of the distribution delay the Fast Company ended up having. We're going to be looking at The Brood, also from 1979. It will be an interesting return to the body horror that we have already experienced with Cronenberg. This one has Oliver Reed, Samantha Egger, Art Hindle, and as I mentioned earlier, we're going to be seeing Nicholas Campbell again popping up here.
Is this another one that you are familiar with?
I have seen this one, and I actually have started my rewatch of it. So I'm
excellent.
It's a very interesting one. I'm looking forward to discussing this one with you next week.
Very weird to say, Andy, but I am looking forward to getting back into a little Cronenberg horror.
All right, everybody. When the movie ends,
the conversation begins. Amazon giveth, Andy.
As Amazon always doeth.
Amazon didn't really today.
Nah.
You think meh?
Not in the lower regions.
Certainly not in the nether regions. Not in the nethers. I've got a 5-star. I think we went high because the nethers were barren. And so I ended up with King of Things, who gave it a 5 stars. Says it's an odd movie, but there is little in the drag racing genre for us. Fun to watch because of the vintage film and the driver's perspective on a run in a funny car. But if you're looking for Oscar performances, forget that. Though you do get to see Claudia Jennings before she lost her life later that year.
Wow, it's a real up and down.
It's a roller coaster, much like this movie isn't.
Oh, you're so mean.
You have one?
I have one from Heather. Heather Florida, I guess, is her name or her moniker. She says 5 stars and says gift. Got this as a gift for my dad. It worked and he enjoyed it, I think.
That's a real
5
twist,
stars.
5 stars. He said quibbles.
I don't think she knows how to give ratings.
No, she doesn't know what stars do. There's a great movie somewhere that's short 5 stars because of her review. Thanks, Amazon. It's hard to believe we have been having in-depth weekly conversations about movies since 2011.
Oh, you're telling me. Producing this show week after week is so much fun, but it does require a ton of work behind the scenes. If you'd like to help support our efforts, one easy way is by using our originals page when shopping for books and movies that we've covered.
Your purchases made through our links give us a small commission at no extra cost to you and allow us to keep having these great discussions.
We are highlighting adaptations from Season 9 over at our originals page, thenextreel.com/originals. That's the site where listeners can purchase the source material for all of our adapted film discussions.
We had a big Robin Hood series this season, looking at 9 different versions on screen. Many were likely adapted from Howard Pyle's The Merry Adventures of Robin Hood, including Douglas Fairbanks in Robin Hood, The Adventures of Robin Hood, Disney's Robin Hood Prince of Thieves, and the 1991 Robin Hood, and Ridley Scott's Robin Hood.
Robin and Marian was specifically based on the ballad The Jest of Robin Hood.
And we really don't have too much to say about Robin and the Seven Hoods.
We talked Dead Ringers for our David Cronenberg series adapted from Barry Wood and Jack Geesland's novel Twins.
Have you checked out that show?
You know, I haven't, but I've heard great things.
2 comedies from our Steve Martin series were adaptations, Pennies from Heaven from the BBC series, and The Lonely Guy from the book by Bruce J. Friedman.
The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas was part of our Colin Higgins series, adapted from the Broadway musical.
Spike Lee brought us Black Klansman from Ron Stallworth's memoir.
And we looked at a trio of John le Carré adaptations, The Spy Who Came In From the Cold, The Little Drummer Girl, and Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy.
Plus, all 3 movies in our Agnieszka Holland series were based on books, Europa, In Darkness, and Spore.
La Cage aux Folles and its remake The Birdcage both came from Jean Poiret's original play.
We also talked about Arsenic and Old Lace and Charade in our Cary Grant series.
All of these were based on other material, and it is all available on our originals page, thenextreel.com/originals. Every book purchased supports the podcast.
Get the full list of adaptations we've covered and start your next read today at thenextreel.com/originals.